Are you a true crime junkie? Do you talk about true crime with your friends all of the time? And are there cases that have stuck with you for so many years because of geographic or emotional closeness? If so, then welcome to Fatalities. I'm Elisa Lucas, and this is the podcast where I explore true crime cases over tea with the help of my friends. Because without tea, friends, and good conversation, there's nothing but darkness and chaos. So grab a warm cup of tea and join me as my friends and I discuss the cases that have struck a chord with us and the related issues that might help us understand why such horrible crimes have occurred. The podcast is dropped every other Wednesday and is available on such podcatchers as Apple, Podbean, Spotify, and so much more. You may follow Fatalities on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but don't forget that Teas is spelled T-E-A-S, because here is where we spill the tea.
On Thursday, March 25th, 1993, a 21-year-old newspaper carrier named Cheryl Jenkins set out to deliver her papers with her friend Wendy Sweeney in Geauga County, a rural and suburban county southeast of Cleveland, Ohio. Along the route, they made a horrible discovery. They found the lifeless body of a newborn baby boy on Sidley Road. His body had been mauled by wild animals post-mortem, and the umbilical cord was still attached. The identity of the baby boy would remain a mystery for years. From the South Shore of Lake Erie, this is Great Lakes True Crime. Authorities on scene believe the baby boy was no more than 3 days old when he died, but they said he could have been out on the rural road for as many as 3 weeks. John Deering, an investigator with the Geauga County Coroner's Office, said the baby did not appear to have been delivered with help from medical professionals, and he was not stillborn. He added that this was the most disturbing case he had ever investigated. The boy's body had an arm, a leg, and some internal organs consumed by a wild animal. It was most likely a dog or a pack of dogs, as a passerby had later said he saw 2 dogs fighting over something on the road, although he assumed it was just an animal carcass. More than 7 months later, in November 1993, the coroner's office had determined that they had conducted all possible forensic tests on the baby. Even with all the tests completed, a cause of death could not be determined, nor could it be determined how long the body had been on the road. The coroner's office was finally releasing the body for burial. A funeral was held for Jesus' baby several days later at the Church of St. Mary in Chardon, Ohio, after which the baby was buried in a plot at Maple Grove Cemetery. The plot was donated by the Thompson Township trustees. The baby, who would never open Christmas presents or have a birthday party, was showered with love for a day. At the funeral, which was attended by about 40 community residents, Geauga County Deputy Sheriff Joseph Keogh played Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. Funeral organizer Betty Nenadal placed a single red rose on the coffin, and another woman set down a yellow rattle. A teddy bear, a silver spoon, a baseball, and a pacifier were placed inside the coffin. Sheriff's deputies served as the pallbearers. In addition to financial donations for the funeral, local residents donated funeral supplies, ranging from flowers to a burial gown. Donations in excess of the fundraiser's $2,000 goal were given to the Geauga County Shelter for Abused Women and Children. After the funeral, unfortunately, the investigation slowed to a snail's pace. The case went cold but continued to haunt investigators for years, decades even. In March 2003, 10 years after Geauga's baby was found, Sergeant Tom Dewey was looking through the old boxes of evidence, searching for any clues that may have been missed until that point. Sergeant Dewey was a 34-year veteran of the Geauga County Sheriff's Office and was the first officer on scene when the baby's remains were found. "This is the most horrific crime I've ever seen," Dewey said. "It just gets to you. No matter how much time passes, it still gets you." He went on to say, "Until the day I take my last breath of air, I will look at Geauga's child like he's a child of mine." The coroner's office from nearby Cuyahoga County, which is much larger and has far more resources, was asked to complete a DNA analysis of stored tissue samples taken from the baby's body. It was hoped that the genetic information could help match the baby with his parents, which would have been a key to solving the case. Sergeant Dewey admitted at the time that it was a long shot, but it was the only hope they had. Unfortunately, the DNA testing performed back then in 2003 yielded no useful information. On March 25, 2003, which is 10 years to the day after Geauga's baby was discovered, a memorial service attended by about 20 people was held at Maple Grove Cemetery. The attention surrounding the 10-year anniversary led to a tip being called in by a member of the public. Deputies followed up on that tip, but again, it didn't yield any useful information. So the case went cold again. Years passed, no suspects were identified, and no arrests were made. In fact, not only years passed by, but decades passed by. Someone was living with the knowledge that they killed that baby. In all, 26 years of frustration passed. But the frustration came to an end just a few weeks before this podcast was recorded. During a press conference held June 6, 2019, the Geauga County Sheriff's Office announced it had a suspect in custody. The suspect is a 49-year-old resident of Euclid, Ohio, just east of Cleveland, named Gail Eastwood Ritchie. She had been arrested that day in Cleveland. She worked as a receptionist at a dance school in nearby Mayfield, Ohio. According to Geauga County Prosecutor Jim Flays, who convened a special grand jury on June 6th, Eastwood Ritchie was indicted on one charge of aggravated murder and one charge of murder. A search warrant had been issued 2 weeks earlier. The suspect admitted to investigators that she gave birth to the baby boy, then placed him in a trash bag and deserted him in a woods. Investigators believed that when the dogs or other animals came to feed on the baby, they dragged the child's body into the street. But this gruesome crime wasn't the only heinous thing that Eastwood Ritchie admitted to. She said that she committed a similar crime 2 years prior to the death of Geauga's baby, when she abandoned a newborn baby somewhere in the city of Euclid, and that case remains under investigation. She was released on $250,000 bond and pleaded not guilty. Geauga County Sheriff Scott Hildenberg said investigators used recent developments in DNA technology to identify potential family members of the child. The investigators used a familial DNA search through the service GEDmatch.com to identify over 1,400 people from around the world who were possible relatives of the baby boy. GED Match allows its 1.3 million users to upload text files of their DNA that they may obtain through other DNA genealogy websites, such as Ancestry.com or 23andMe. The user's DNA is matched with distant relatives who also uploaded their genetic information to the database. This is a crime-fighting method that became widely known when it was used in the 2018 arrest of the Golden State Killer in California. Neighbors of Eastwood Ritchie are said to have been shocked by this turn of events, as they only knew her as a happily married woman with 3 adult children. The couple was married in 1994, and she is said to have hidden the pregnancy from the father, who is now her husband. Let's listen to a recent news report from WKYC Channel 3 in Cleveland to sum up the recent events.
New video shows the arrest of a woman accused of killing 2 of her babies decades ago and leaving their bodies in trash bags. Well, tonight we are learning more about what's next for Gail Ritchie.
Monica Robbins will help us dig into what would make a mother do something like this and how she lived with it for so long.
But first, Andrew Horansky has some answers and the hope of a former lead detective on the case. And Drew joins us live tonight in Euclid. Good evening.
Good evening to you. That is because this is where Gail Ritchie lived, by many accounts, living a normal life, raising 3 grown kids. We visited her home today, as well as her parents. No one had anything they wanted to say to the media at this point, while a detective who has held her son near and dear for so many years had a lot to say.
And I just was so ecstatic I could hardly talk.
Sergeant Tom Dewey, retired from the Geauga County Sheriff's Department, returned to this grave today in Thompson to spend time with an infant who never had a name or a chance, remembered the past 26 years only as Geauga's child.
And I told him, little guy, we found your mother, and I hope to make her pay.
Dewey was the first investigator on scene in March 1993, when the remains of an infant boy born alive were found along Sidley Road, mauled by animals' umbilical cords still attached. His origins a mystery for decades, until DNA recently linked him to a 49-year-old woman from Euclid who was arrested yesterday and booked. Her name, Gail Eastwood Ritchie, a married middle-class mother of 3 who once worked as a nanny. Not the person that Dewey would have pictured to allegedly leave a boy in a trash bag on a cold night alone in the woods and then leave.
A lot of us thought the mother was a prostitute, and probably her pimp got rid of the kid for her. I couldn't believe it.
Investigators say Ritchie confessed to the crime but showed little remorse, referring to the infant as it. Charged with murder and aggravated murder, she faces life in prison with the eligibility for parole after 15 years, but not the death penalty under 1993 law, while Dewey wants more.
On March 25th of every year she's in prison, she's put in solitary confinement with a poster on the wall of the child's headstone.
Ritchie will be in court on Monday morning, and although she allegedly confessed to doing the same thing to another child 2 years prior to Geauga's baby, this one in Euclid, there was no evidence of that alleged crime, and therefore she will not be charged for that one.
You can certainly see how much this case meant to Sergeant Dewey. Does he think that she ever shared this secret with anyone?
He does not, and her husband, by the way, has not been charged in this case. He had hoped that had she confided in someone, their conscience, their emotions would have gotten the better of them and they would have confessed at this point. Again, though, how she was able to allegedly keep 2 pregnancies to herself without people knowing, all part of one big mystery.
Absolutely. So many questions. Thank you, Andrew Horansky in Euclid tonight.
Gail's husband is currently under investigation to see if he had taken part in the murder or the cover-up. Gail is awaiting trial and could be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for her horrendous crime. This has been a brief but important episode of Great Lakes True Crime. I'm your host and producer, Steve. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter by searching for Great Lakes True Crime. If you like the show, please tell a friend and leave us a positive review. Thanks for listening, Buys.